Medieval people didn't buy shields. They built them. From nothing. No factory, no machines, no help from the local blacksmith. If they got it wrong, it wasn't just embarrassing. It was deadly. You'll never look at a wooden board the same way after learning how these were made from scratch. They started with the forest, but not just any tree would do. Shield makers were picky about their wood, and for good reason. Your life might depend on choosing the right one. They didn't just swing an axe at the first tall oak they saw. Linden wood, also called basswood, was the gold standard for shield making. This tree grows straight and tall, with wood that's surprisingly tough despite being lightweight. It's nature's answer to bubble wrap, except it actually stops sharp objects instead of just being fun to pop. Poplar came in second place, offering similar benefits with its fine grain and shock-absorbing qualities. The timing of tree cutting mattered more than most people realize. Medieval craftsmen waited for winter months when the sap had retreated deep into the roots. Trees cut in winter contained less moisture and were less likely to crack or warp during drying. A shield that splits down the middle during your first battle is about as useful as a chocolate sword. Finding straight-grained logs required a keen eye. Shield makers looked for trees without major knots or twisted grain that could cause the finished product to fail. They understood that wood grain direction determined strength, so they searched for trees with grain running parallel to the trunk. Instead of sawing logs into boards, they split them along natural grain lines using iron wedges and wooden mallets. This technique preserved the wood's natural strength by following its fiber direction rather than cutting across it. Each strike had to be precise. Medieval woodworkers didn't have the luxury of a hardware store return policy. Raw wood contained too much moisture to work with immediately. The seasoning process could take months or even a full year. Craftsmen stacked split boards with spacers between each piece, allowing air to circulate. They kept these stacks covered but not sealed, protecting from rain while allowing moisture to escape slowly. Quality control started at the tree level. A single weak board could compromise an entire shield, so craftsmen inspected every piece before committing to the long seasoning process. Better to be choosy with trees than to end up choosing which sword wound hurts least. The wood preparation phase could make or break the entire project. Shield makers understood that rushing this foundation work would create problems later. But having perfect wood was only the beginning. Turning those rough boards into something that could save your life required a completely different set of skills. Transforming seasoned boards into shield shapes required tools that would look primitive today, but were perfectly suited for medieval woodworking. The goal was creating flat, even surfaces that would fit together seamlessly while maintaining the wood's natural strength. Draw knives became the primary tool for flattening rough split boards. These curved blades with handles on both ends pulled toward the user, shaving away high spots and irregularities with each stroke. Using a draw knife was the medieval version of extreme shaving. One slip and you'd need more than a bandage. Adzes served as precision shaping tools that looked like axes bent at 90 degrees. Craftsmen could remove exact amounts of wood with controlled swings, gradually sculpting boards to the desired thickness. Adze work required the precision of a surgeon and the confidence of a gambling man. Shield shapes evolved dramatically over the centuries as warfare tactics changed. Early round shields measured about 3 feet across and offered excellent protection against multiple attack angles. Round shields were the medieval equivalent of one-size-fits-all clothing. Not fancy, but they got the job done for almost everyone. Norman kite shields appeared later as cavalry warfare became more important. The elongated teardrop shape protected mounted warriors' left sides while allowing mobility on horseback. These shields were longer and narrower than their round predecessors. Creating different shield shapes required joining multiple boards together. Most shields needed at least 3 or 4 planks to achieve proper width, making edge gluing a critical skill. Animal hide glue provided the strongest adhesive available, made from boiling cattle bones and hooves until they dissolved into sticky liquid. Getting glue application wrong was worse than burning dinner. Dinner only ruined one meal, but bad glue ruined months of work. The gluing process demanded perfect timing because hot hide glue began setting within minutes of application, leaving no room for hesitation. Pressure came from whatever materials were available. Heavy stones provided simple clamping force when placed on top of glued joints. Rope tourniquets wrapped around shield assemblies and twisted tight with wooden levers created more sophisticated pressure systems. Surface preparation marked the final step before adding structural reinforcements. Craftsmen used scrapers made from sharp steel to remove tool marks and create smooth, even surfaces. However, even the most perfectly shaped wood remained vulnerable without the right kind of backbone to hold it together under pressure. Every medieval shield needed reinforcement to survive combat, but these structural elements had to be added without compromising balance or usability. The reinforcements often made the difference between a functional defensive tool and expensive kindling. Shield rims took tremendous punishment during battle as weapons slid along surfaces and warriors used shields to block and parry attacks. Unprotected shield edges lasted about as long as fresh bread in a hungry army camp. Rawhide strips provided the most common rim protection across medieval Europe. This untanned leather retained most of its original strength while remaining flexible enough to wrap around curved edges. Craftsmen stretched damp leather around shield perimeters and secured it with small iron nails. Rawhide was basically medieval duct tape, except it came from cows and actually improved with age. Iron rim strips offered superior protection, but added significant weight. Blacksmiths hammered these from flat bar stock, carefully shaping them to follow shield contours. The metal strips attached with small nails driven through pre-drilled holes. Shield bosses formed the centerpiece of most medieval defensive systems. These dome-shaped metal pieces protected the hand grip while deflecting incoming thrusts away from the shield bearer's body. Making a boss was like arguing with your spouse. You had to apply pressure gradually and consistently, or everything would fall apart. Creating a boss required significant metalworking expertise. Blacksmiths started with flat iron sheets and gradually hammered them into dome shapes using specialized forming tools. The process involved hundreds of careful hammer blows, stretching the metal without creating weak spots. Boss placement had to be precisely centered on the shield for proper balance. Off-center bosses created awkward handling characteristics that could prove fatal in combat. Most bosses used 4 to 6 mounting points arranged symmetrically around the dome's base. A shield covered in metal studs sent a clear message. This warrior wasn't planning to run away from trouble. Wooden reinforcement bars ran across shield backs to prevent excessive flexing under impact. These crossbars distributed force across the entire shield structure. Quality control became absolutely critical during reinforcement installation. Every rivet had to be properly set, every joint had to be tight, and every metal component had to be securely fastened. But all this careful metalwork would be wasted if the shield couldn't stand up to daily wear and combat conditions. The wooden shield core needed protection from weapons, weather, and wear, which meant adding tough outer coverings that could absorb impacts while preventing splinters from flying during combat. This protective layer also created smooth surfaces for painted decorations. Linen fabric dominated shield covering across medieval Europe because flax grew widely and produced strong, durable fibers. Shield makers preferred medium-weight cloth with tight weaves that wouldn't tear easily under stress. Cutting linen wrong was worse than cutting your hair wrong. Hair grows back, but ruined fabric stays ruined. Animal glue application demanded speed and precision because the adhesive began setting within minutes of cooling. Workers heated fresh batches in clay pots, maintaining temperatures that kept the glue liquid without burning. The consistency had to be perfect. Too thick and it wouldn't spread. Too thin and it wouldn't hold anything stronger than a gentle breeze. The covering process began with spreading hot glue across shield sections while still steaming. Craftsmen immediately pressed fabric into place, working quickly to smooth out air bubbles and wrinkles before the glue cooled. Multiple linen layers created the strongest covering systems. Rawhide offered superior protection for shields that would see heavy combat use. Shield makers soaked rawhide sheets in warm water until they became flexible, then stretched them over shield surfaces while still damp. The rawhide had to be just right. Too wet and it would shrink like a frightened turtle. Too dry and it would crack like old parchment. Cuir bouilli represented the premium covering option for wealthy warriors. This boiled leather underwent a hardening process that created surfaces almost as tough as thin metal armor. Getting the timing right was crucial for proper hardening without destroying the material. Edge treatment presented special challenges regardless of covering material. The fabric or leather had to wrap smoothly around rim reinforcements, without creating bulky seams that could catch on weapons. High-stress areas around the shield center received extra reinforcement layers. Some workshops experimented with mixed covering systems using different materials in different areas. Leather might cover high impact zones, while lighter linen protected less critical areas, balancing protection against weight and cost. Drying time was crucial for achieving maximum covering strength. Glued surfaces needed at least 24 hours to reach full bond strength, while wet rawhide required even longer to achieve final hardness. Once this protective layer was complete, the shield needed something to make it truly distinctive on the battlefield. Medieval shield decorations served far more than artistic purposes. They were essential identification systems that helped warriors recognize allies and intimidate enemies in battle chaos. The painted designs also provided weather protection while announcing the bearer's social status, religious beliefs, and family connections. Gesso preparation formed the foundation for quality shield artwork. This white primer, made from powdered chalk mixed with animal glue and water, sealed the fabric surface and created a smooth base for paint colors. Getting gesso smooth was harder than getting teenagers to clean their rooms, but considerably more important for the final result. Pigment preparation demanded knowledge of local materials and expensive trade goods. Red colors came from iron oxide deposits, literally rust ground into powder. Yellow pigments derived from clay ochres found naturally in many regions. Blue remained the most expensive color because it required imported materials that cost more than most people's houses. Egg tempera served as the primary painting medium because it dried quickly and adhered well to prepared surfaces. Artists mixed fresh egg yolks with water and pigments each day, creating paint that had to be used immediately before spoiling. Working with egg tempera was like cooking breakfast and painting at the same time. Timing was everything. Religious symbols dominated early medieval shield designs as Christianity spread across Europe. Crosses appeared in dozens of variations, from simple Latin crosses to elaborate Celtic knots. Saint symbols identified the bearer's patron or hometown, while biblical scenes demonstrated pious devotion that might provide divine protection. Heraldic animals became increasingly popular as family identification systems developed. Lions represented courage and royal connections. Eagles symbolized divine power, and dragons often represented wisdom and protection rather than evil. Dragons on shields were basically medieval security systems. They warned enemies that this warrior had backup from the supernatural customer service department. Color symbolism followed established conventions that medieval audiences understood immediately. Red indicated martial prowess and willingness to shed blood. Gold represented wealth and divine favor, while blue conveyed loyalty and truth. Black suggested grief or determination unto death, while green indicated hope and joy. The painting process required artistic skills that took years to develop. Professional shield painters worked from background colors forward, laying down base tones before adding details. They understood how to create bold, simple designs that remained visible and recognizable even at distances and poor lighting conditions. Geometric patterns offered alternatives for warriors who couldn't afford custom animal designs or lacked family heraldry. Stripes, chevrons, and diamonds could be painted quickly while still providing distinctive identification. Some designs included abbreviated Latin text or family mottos for educated nobility. Weather protection became important in paint selection and application. The best painters applied multiple thin coats rather than single thick layers, building up colors gradually for better durability. They sealed finished designs with protective coatings made from tree resins or additional layers of thinned glue. But even the most beautiful shield was useless if nobody could hold it properly when the fighting started. The most beautifully decorated shield became worthless if warriors couldn't hold it securely during combat. Medieval grip systems had to balance comfort, control, and durability while allowing quick movements and weapon changes. Getting the handle arrangement wrong could mean the difference between deflecting an attack and taking a sword to the face. Center grip systems dominated early medieval shields, featuring single horizontal handles mounted directly behind metal bosses. These handles were carved from hardwood with grain running perpendicular to the grip direction for maximum strength. Center grips turned shields into medieval brass knuckles with better coverage and considerably more style. Handle attachment required precise positioning and multiple fastening methods to prevent failure under combat stress. Warriors could punch with the boss, hook opponents' weapons, or use the shield edge as a striking surface. Center grips were perfect for warriors who believed the best defense was a good offense, preferably delivered to the enemy's face. Arm strap systems represented later developments that distributed shield weight across the entire forearm rather than concentrating it in hand muscles. This system used leather straps called Immerse, typically arranged in 2 or 3 positions along the shield's vertical center line for optimal balance. The main inarm secured the forearm just below the elbow, providing the primary attachment point that carried most of the shield's weight. Adjusting straps in the middle of battle was like trying to tie your shoes while running from a bear. Technically possible, but highly inadvisable. Leather selection for strap construction required careful consideration of strength and flexibility. Cowhide provided excellent durability, but could become stiff in cold conditions. Deerhide remained more flexible in various weather, but wore out faster under heavy use. Strap attachment points represented critical stress concentrations that had to be engineered carefully. Each inarme required multiple mounting points spread across several inches to distribute pulling forces evenly. Craftsmen used combinations of rivets, stitching, and reinforcement patches to secure straps safely. Padding systems improved comfort during extended wear while helping absorb shock from heavy impacts. Some shield makers attached wool or linen cushions to inner surfaces around grip areas. Handle wrapping improved grip security and reduced hand fatigue during long engagements. Having both grip types was like carrying a backup plan for your backup plan. Regional preferences influenced grip designs across different parts of medieval Europe. Scandinavian shields typically retained center grip systems longer, while Southern European shields adopted arm strap systems earlier. Of course, having the perfect grip meant nothing if you didn't understand what your shield could and couldn't actually do in a real fight. Medieval shields were remarkably effective tools when used properly, but they had significant limitations that smart warriors learned to understand and work around. The combination of wood, leather, and metal could stop many attacks while remaining light enough for extended use, though no shield provided complete protection against all weapons. Arrow defense represented one of the shield's most important functions during medieval archery warfare. Well-constructed shields could stop most arrows fired from hunting bows, with the wooden core absorbing impact energy while the covering prevented complete penetration. Shields turned expensive arrows into medieval toothpicks, which was probably very satisfying for the shield bearer. Different arrow types created different challenges for shield defense. Bodkin points, designed specifically for armor penetration, concentrated tremendous force in tiny areas that could punch through weak spots in shield construction. Broadhead hunting arrows created larger wounds, but were less likely to penetrate completely because their wider profiles distributed force across larger areas. Crossbow bolts posed more serious threats due to their higher velocity and heavier construction. Standard shields could still stop many crossbow shots, but the heavier projectiles concentrated more energy in smaller impact zones. Crossbow bolts hit shields like angry hornets made of iron, small, fast, and absolutely determined to ruin your day. Shield positioning became critical for effective defense. Warriors learned to angle their shields to deflect projectiles rather than absorbing them directly, allowing arrows to glance off rather than embedding in the wooden core. The boss was basically a medieval airbag that deployed automatically whenever someone tried to stab you. Sword encounters represented the most common shield use in close combat. Slashing attacks typically glanced off curved shield surfaces without causing significant structural damage. Thrusting attacks proved more dangerous because they concentrated force in smaller areas that could potentially penetrate the covering and damage the wooden core. Spear and lance attacks required different defensive techniques because the longer weapons allowed attackers to generate tremendous striking force. Taking a spear thrust directly could drive the point completely through shield construction, making deflection techniques essential for survival. The reach advantage of spears meant shield bearers had to close distance quickly or risk being picked off from safety. Shield weight affected performance throughout extended battles. Most medieval shields weighed between 5 and 10 pounds, which became increasingly difficult to handle as arm muscles fatigued during long engagements. Warriors had to balance protection needs against mobility requirements, especially during retreats or rapid advances. Offensive shield use added another dimension to medieval combat beyond simple defense. Large shields could push opponents off balance or create openings for weapon attacks. The metal boss became a striking weapon capable of delivering devastating punches to unarmored faces or bodies when used aggressively. Blunt weapons like maces and warhammers created different types of shield damage than edged weapons. Instead of cutting or puncturing, these weapons delivered crushing blows that could shatter wooden cores or collapse metal reinforcements. Repeated heavy impacts gradually weakened even the strongest shield construction, requiring careful positioning to minimize direct hits. Medieval shields were like medieval insurance policies. They covered most problems but had exclusions for the really expensive disasters. Environmental conditions significantly affected shield performance, with rain-loosening joints and cold weather stiffening leather components. But understanding these limits was only half the battle. Knowing what to do when things inevitably went wrong was the other half. But even the finest medieval shields eventually succumbed to combat damage, weather exposure, and simple wear from extended use. When shields suffered damage, warriors faced practical decisions about repair costs, replacement options, and alternative uses. Minor covering damage could usually be repaired with materials available to most warriors. Small tears in linen fabric were patched with fresh pieces glued over damaged areas, creating visible mends that told stories of past battles. Repairing leather shields was like mending socks, except the holes came from swords instead of toes, and the consequences of failure were slightly more serious. Cracked wooden cores presented more serious challenges that tested medieval woodworking skills. Surface cracks could sometimes be sealed with hot glue forced into splits, then clamped until the adhesive cured completely. Glue joint failures were like broken promises. They affected everything that depended on them and were much harder to fix than prevent. Economic considerations heavily influenced repair decisions throughout all levels of medieval society. Wealthy warriors could afford to replace damaged shields frequently, while common soldiers had to make equipment last as long as possible. Some repair techniques were more creative than a medieval merchant's tax accounting. Severely damaged shields found new purposes rather than being discarded wastefully. Wooden cores became raw material for tool handles, furniture components, or construction materials. Retired shields were the medieval equivalent of old cars, too valuable to throw away but too broken to use for their original purpose. Metal components from broken shields were particularly valuable because iron remained expensive throughout the medieval period. Bosses and rim reinforcements could be removed and reforged into nails, tools, weapons, or hardware for other projects. Burned shields provided fuel for cooking fires or metalworking forges with usable metal separated before burning. Trophy shields occasionally avoided recycling by being preserved as symbols of victory or family heritage. Church storage areas sometimes accumulated retired shields from local warriors who donated equipment rather than selling it for scrap value. Regional differences influenced how broken shields were handled across different parts of medieval Europe. The disposal and repurposing of broken shields reflected medieval society's practical approach to resource management, where nothing useful was wasted and everything had potential value in the right circumstances. From selecting the perfect tree to painting the final design, medieval shield making was a complete journey of survival, craftsmanship, and resourcefulness.